criminal charges. Let's go live to the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. He joins me now from Canberra. Treasurer, thank you for your time. You've agreed to 76 recommendations to the government implementing those. When will this implementation process of all these recommendations be completed?
Well, we've set up a implementation task force within Treasury, Laura, and there are some things that we can do straight away. For example, we have currently legislation before the Parliament to ensure that directors within superannuation funds face civil penalties where they break the law. Commissioner Hayne recommended that that be extended to trustees. We will now amend our existing legislation. I'll also be giving a direction to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority to ensure that they can hear the greater range of cases that we announced yesterday going back a decade. There are a number of things that we are doing already, including announcing yesterday that there will be a capability review of the prudential regulator, APRA, led by Graham Samuel. So we'll get on with the job, but there will also be a legislative program that will take some time to implement.
Criminal charges against 3 institutions, further investigations into others. What can and is the government doing to ensure that this doesn't stretch out over a decade and, you know, we don't see justice when this recommendation, this Royal Commission has recommended criminal charges?
Well, the next steps are going to be up to the regulators themselves because Commissioner Hayne has referred more than 20 cases to both APRA and ASIC. They will undertake the required investigations and do the required follow-up. But they have made clear to me, as the heads of those organisations, that they take these referrals very seriously. And Commissioner Hayne did point out in his report that he has seen a change in the approach of these organisations. We'll be watching that very closely.
Well, yes,
because clearly
Treasurer,
they were preferring negotiation over litigation.
Yeah, forgive me, but I think Australians watching this morning will have little faith in APRA and ASIC. I know changes have been made, but part of these recommendations was really to have a watchdog overseeing the watchdogs. I mean, this seems like bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy.
Well, there are a number of steps that we have taken which will have, I think, the desired effect. Well, first, we've put in new leadership within ASIC. So we have a new chair, 2 new deputy chairs. Secondly, we've actually... well, I think the approach was the problem. There was a preference of negotiation over litigation, and that was pointed out by Commissioner Hayne. Infringement notices where instead they may be cases that should have gone to court, press releases and penalties that didn't necessarily fit the offence in question. We've also provided an additional $170 million to our regulators and to our enforcement agencies, and we're providing them with greater power. So there are a number of things that we are doing, which I think will see a different approach.
Is this...
Well, the $170 million is obviously taxpayers' money of additional funding, and that is because these regulators have an expanded remit and they do need to do the required work to ensure that anyone who is engaged in misconduct in the financial system is held to account.
Treasurer, you've stopped just short of implementing mortgage broking reforms as recommended by the Royal Commission. Why?
Well, actually, there were a number of reforms which we did adopt in relation to mortgage brokers. Putting in place a best interest duty, we've said tick to that. Getting rid of trailing commissions, we've said tick to that. Then there was a recommendation from Commissioner Hayne that you move away from a model which saw the lender provide the mortgage broker with a commission to a model where you would see actually the borrower pay an upfront fee. Now, the Productivity Commission, the Sedgwick Review and the Murray Review all said that if you move to that model, it would impact negatively on competition. In effect, you would be putting the mortgage brokers out of business and giving that business to the big banks. So, Laura, what we don't want to do is strengthen the big banks at the expense of more than 20,000 small businesses across the community. We have said that in 2022, there will be a review of the impact of moving to such a new model, but also we can then assess how this best interest duty, which we've agreed to implement, is playing out.
Well, the Finance Brokers Association has told us here this morning that even with the changes you have implemented, or say you will implement with trailing commissions, etc., will have a huge impact on many small businesses that operate as mortgage brokers. Do you expect anyone to go out of business? Can you ensure that no one will because of these changes?
Well, we've actually put in transition arrangements, for example, for the abolition of volume-based commissions, as well as for the change to trailing commissions. So we're very conscious of the impact that this has on the industry, but at the same time recognise that Commissioner Hayne has made some strong recommendations that we're acting upon.
Okay, but do you expect that this will really shake up the mortgage broking industry? The warnings from that industry this morning, Treasurer, have been that people will go out of business because of the changes you are making.
I think what we've announced is a balanced set of reforms that take into account the fact that these businesses play an important part in our financial sector and that they particularly help some of the smaller lenders. And we are taking note of what the Productivity Commission has said about the negative impacts on competition were you to move away from this model. But I want to point out to you and your viewers, Laura, that we have not only adopted these a set of recommendations around mortgage brokers, but we've also put in place a compensation scheme of last resort. We've accepted the recommendations around new disciplinary bodies for financial advisors, the preventing of the hawking of insurance policies, the penalties for trustees of superannuation funds. We are going to be doing things right across the board, including what we're already doing with the Banking Executive Accountability regime to ensure that Australians get a better deal from their financial institutions.
Now, the NAB chairman, Ken Henry, and CEO Andrew Thorburn were singled out for special scathing criticism by Kenneth Hayne. Are their positions tenable in your view?
Look, it's not for me to comment on individual companies or individuals themselves. That is a matter for the boards and for the shareholders of those organisations working out for them what is not only in the company's best interest, but obviously in their customers' best interest.
Hasn't this whole Royal Commission, Treasurer, proven that sometimes the banks don't know where that line is? And that's exactly what Kenneth Hayne has said in this report. So in your view, would it be an affront to this report if those two individuals were to stay on in their current positions?
Well, look, again, I'm not going to comment on individual cases, but what I will say...
Why not, Treasurer?
...is that because as the Treasurer, these are market-sensitive decisions that need to be taken by those who are directly responsible within those organisations. They recognise that those businesses have a social licence to operate. They recognise that the public have lost trust in those financial institutions. We have all been shocked by the stories of fees for no service, fees charged to dead people, the mis-selling of insurance. These are pretty dramatic examples of where the banks have not put the interests of consumers first.
And
I'm very conscious of going forward, they will and they must do better.
Apologies for interrupting, but you talked about cultural change and the change in direction at our watchdog. Surely, with the direction that we've seen at NAB and the scathing criticism brought forward by this Royal Commission, that individuals must take responsibility for cultural change as well.
Well, I think Commissioner Hayne made that point very, very clearly. He said that at the end of the day, it's those financial institutions and the individuals within them that must take responsibility for the consequences of their actions. That is where he laid the blame. And from here on, the banking sector must change, and they must put the interests of consumers first and foremost. And we need to restore trust in our financial system because, Laura, our financial system is so important to our economy, representing around 10% of GDP and employing around 450,000 people. Each of us are touched by what is occurring in our financial system. That's why it needs to work in consumers' interests.
This also has a political element as we move quickly towards an election. It's been pointed out this morning by your political opponents that one of the biggest mortgage brokers in the country is Aussie John Simon. He's also a massive donor historically and currently to the Liberal Party. Is there anything we should read into that?
Well, there are people in the financial system who are massive and historic donors to the Labor Party. So I think that's the pot calling the kettle black. Maybe what has really upset Chris Bowen is that Aussie John came out and was highly critical of Labor's plans on negative gearing and the impacts that that would have on the property market. So maybe he's trying to conflate two different issues.
Treasurer, just finally, are you sorry?
Look, I absolutely understand the deep hurt that's been felt by people right across the economy and the community. And what we have said is that in taking action on all 76 recommendations, we will get a better deal for Australian consumers. We're on the consumer side and the banks must do better.
Could your government have handled this better though? Are you sorry?
Well, I want to point out to you and your viewers that when we first came to government, we commissioned the Financial Systems Inquiry by David Murray, and a number of those recommendations we have implemented, which has been endorsed by Commissioner Hayne because they are working in the interests of Australian consumers, including the Banking Executive Accountability Regime.
Treasurer, thank you for your time.
Good to be with you.